What are the biggest trends in cruising for 2020? I'm Gary Bembridge. This is another of my cruising tips for travelers. I want to give you my predictions on what I think the 6 big trends that you're going to experience in cruising in 2020 are. Starting with this one. Without a shadow of a doubt, we're going to keep seeing the continued growth of cruising, both in terms of passenger trips and also the expansion of ships. It's predicted that there will be 32 million passenger journeys in 2020, which is up from 30 million in 2019. But importantly, that growth is being fueled by a couple of things. First of all, there are more ships coming into service. Every year there are loads of them. In 2020, there are going to be 19 new ships coming into service across a wide range of cruise lines, including Carnival, Celebrity, Crystal Cruises, Costa, MSC Cruises, P&O Cruises, Ponant, Regent Seven Seas, Royal Caribbean, Saga, Silver Sea. So many new ships coming, which of course gets lots of excitement and people trying cruise ships, particularly some of them are pretty innovative. The other thing that's going to drive it a lot is expedition cruising. There's a great big growth in expedition cruising, and there's new ships coming as well as new itineraries from the cruise lines like Silver Sea, Ponant, Scenic, Crystal, Lindblad. All of them have new ships coming along, and there's just a lot of energy, a lot of noise about expedition cruising that's going to places like Arctic, Antarctica, and some of the more exotic places in the world. So that's a big driver. The other big driver, I think, of the growth in cruising is going to be more and more focus on adults and on solo travelers. So the last couple of years, a lot of the growth in cruising has come from attracting families onto cruising as a great value proposition, also getting more multi-generational, obviously because traditionally cruising has been a little bit older, and so encouraging the sort of grandparents to get their kids and their kids' kids onto cruises. So that's been a big push and a really big focus for the cruising. However, what I think we're seeing more and more is cruise lines starting to chase the next generation. So they're chasing the millennials, the Generation X, who are starting to become more interested in cruising, and we're seeing some developments in that area. So for example, Virgin Voyages with their Scarlet Lady, which is going to be 18 focused, trying to be very youthfully driven. We're seeing even, for example, in the UK, Marella Cruises, when they got a new ship, they made it adults only focused. And of course, other cruise lines like Saga, which are bringing new ships on board, which are focused on the adult market. So I think we're going to see a lot of focus on adult cruising as there's an opportunity to have ships and itineraries and routes which cater for couples, particularly young couples who don't want to be surrounded by families. So I think we're definitely going to see in 2020 lots of action happening around those key areas. The second big trend that I think is emerging and going to become more and more prevalent in 2020 is the bundling and getting rid of some of those extra costs and bundling them into the fare. There's a lot of pushback around the extra charges of things like gratuities, Wi-Fi, because of course, as you get more and more younger people or more and more connected people on board, they're used to just having Wi-Fi as included because they used to go to Starbucks or wherever and just having Wi-Fi easily accessible. So we're seeing lots of pushback to the extra charges, whether it's specialty dining, Wi-Fi, gratuities, all those kind of things. And what I've seen is a couple of really interesting things that make me feel that during 2020 and beyond, we're going to see fares becoming more bundled or all-inclusive. Virgin is making a lot of waves when they launch, if you excuse the pun, because when they come on board, their fares are going to include gratuities. They're going to include a lot of basic drinks, some soft drinks, juices, coffees. They're going to include Wi-Fi, they're going to include all of the specialty dining, so dining on all of their venues is included in the price. So bundling more and more in, that's going to make a lot of people, I think, in the industry watch how that goes. The other thing that I've observed is we're starting to see some cruise lines, particularly in the UK, starting to bundle things in more. So in the last year, P&O have built gratuities into their fare. Marella have an all-inclusive option where everything's included within the fare, except for excursions. So we're starting to see that. The other thing I found very interesting, as I was booking various cruises I'm doing in 2020, pretty much all of them had bundled fares in some way. So all the cruises I'm going on have offers and deals when I booked, which bundle things in. So for example, I'm going on a Norwegian cruise in the Caribbean, and that includes specialty dining, Wi-Fi, gratuities, all sorts of things included. Oceania obviously have their OLife fares where you can choose to take excursions, drinks packages, or onboard credit. Ponant, another cruise that I've booked, that bundles pretty much everything in. So I'm seeing more and more that starting to happen. And when I looked at a lot of the offers and deals, what used to happen is a lot of them were offering things like upgrades, but I'm seeing more and more now they're bundled in. So for example, another cruise that I booked with Celebrity, again, pretty much everything was bundled in through that offer. So it's either going to become formal, or you're going to find more and more you can buy deals and get deals which have things more bundled. I think this has become a big trend, particularly as they try and attract more people that are used to just having these things all included. So the third trend is linked to that. And so what cruise lines I think are going to start to do during the course of 2020, and I'm giving you examples where they're already doing that, is as they bundle more things into the fare, they need to find new things that they can charge you once you get on board to generate revenue. The most obvious of these is the pay to get access. So traditionally speaking, if you were in a suite, you'd get all sorts of things included: priority disembarkation, embarkation, perhaps priority seating in the restaurant. You might get some meals bundled in and some of the specialty dining. So we're seeing that start to happen more and more as cruise lines are looking for new ways of charging people. So for example, Carnival have on many of their cruises, particularly in the Caribbean, Faster to the Fun program, which you pay a premium for, and that gives you things like embarkation, get your luggage quicker, all that kind of stuff. Then you have Royal Caribbean, which has the Key, which has even more included, where you get your priority embarkation, disembarkation, but it does include an embarkation day, disembarkation day meal, priority seating in the restaurants, and all sorts of other benefits and features. So that's a new way of getting people to pay extra things. And I think we're going to see more and more people searching out ways that they can get people to charge once you're on board as they bundle more things into the fare. I think that's going to be a big trend coming in 2020. The next trend is one around changing the way that cruise lines call on ports. One of the big challenges as cruising has become more and more popular is over-tourism and places getting really, really crowded. And certainly if you've been in some of the key places in the Caribbean or in the Mediterranean, these places are getting crazy, crazy busy. So cruise lines are increasingly having to look at how to improve the whole experience, both for the cities, the towns, the ports, and also the passengers. So I think we're going to see more and more stuff, and it starts to happen already. So for example, we're seeing more and more cruise lines offer longer stays, so overnight stays, for example. This also means that they can then arrive a little bit later. So some of the ships might be there earlier, people going for excursions earlier, they arrive a little bit later because they're staying overnight or perhaps staying till lunchtime the next day. So we're going to see a lot of that happening. The other thing that we're seeing happening linked to that is excursions. The nature of excursions are changing, where they're looking at putting on more and more excursions to encourage people to get further out. So of course the big incentive for cities and towns and regions is you're trying to push more money and people further out so they share the benefit of the cruise industry. So I think you're going to see more and more excursions which are trying to get people away from the crowded areas. The other thing that we're seeing increasingly is some of the ports are very congested. So whether it's Barcelona or Venice or even Southampton in the UK, just using some examples in Europe. And what we're starting to see increasingly is looking at alternative ports. So in Venice, moving to a port further away from Venice. Barcelona is looking at an example. In the UK, Portsmouth are trying to attract more cruise ships, which is just a little bit down from Southampton. Dover is trying to attract more cruise ships. So starting to see actually pushing where the ships leave from, depart from, into more varied ports close by, but just spreading some of the load. I think we're going to see more and more of this happening as they try to figure out how do they stagger and reduce the impact of cruise and cruise passengers ramming into places. And we're going to see that so much more. Of course, one of the obvious trends is we're going to see more and more focus on the environment, both from a PR perspective, but also from a practical perspective. As cruising grows and as the whole attitude of passengers, governments, regulatory bodies focuses on the environment, the cruise industry has to change. They've set a target of reducing emissions, for example, in this decade by 40%. So for example, what they're doing is looking for alternative fossil fuels. So almost half of all new builds now use LNG, liquefied natural gas, which is dramatically better. We're seeing low sulfur fuels being introduced. There's even some experimentation, particularly on smaller expedition vehicles, with hybrid and battery and biofuel. So a real big push to try and reduce the environmental footprint and the carbon footprint of cruising. Huge push on recycling, removal of single plastics across cruise ships, recycling better, just really looking at the whole waste management, waste water, how do they deal with waste. So I think there's going to be a huge amount of push on environment, partly because they have to, but also I think passengers, certainly already and through 2020, are going to become more and more demanding. And I think start choosing cruise lines that they see and ships that they see that have a better environmental footprint than the past. Another example is increasingly ports are putting in shoreside power, so cruise ships can actually plug themselves into the power grid so they're not in towns pumping out stuff into the air. And of course, ports are being really pushed by the residents in those areas to improve the air quality. Things like that, I think we're going to see much more high profile and much more pressure on cruise lines to address. The other thing I think we're going to keep seeing as a trend is this obsession that cruise lines have with brand partnerships. Every time I go on a cruise, no matter which cruise line it is, whether I've been on it before or not, I just see more and more brand partnerships popping up. There seems to be this real obsession with giving people, when they come on board, recognized brands. So for example, I'll give you an example. When I was on a Seabourn cruise recently, they had a partnership with Tim Rice to do shows. They had a partnership with Thomas Keller on the food. They had a partnership with Molton Brown on toiletries. They had a partnership with Dr. Wheel on wellness. They had a partnership with a guy called Brian Van Flandern on drinks. They had a partnership with UNESCO on excursions. And every time I go on a cruise, I see more and more of these brand partnerships. And also linked to that is branded offerings. So you're seeing more and more well-known brands from land appearing up on ships as dining venues, for example. So there seems to be that obsession, and I think that's going to keep growing in 2020. Those are my predictions of some of the big trends in 2020. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. But remember, I have loads more videos packed full of cruising tips and advice. So why don't you watch another one of them right now?